Alright, Colonial Marines, listen up. Today we're taking a simple game mechanic and drilling into the tactical doctrine that makes it vital in Aliens Fireteam Elite. Shoulder swapping in gamer terms, or shoulder transition for real-life marksmen. Mastering it will tighten your tactics and help you maximize kill zones. Fire teams fall apart fast when friendly fire piles up. Common reason squads rage quit. On casual or standard difficulties, you can skip shoulder swapping and rely on raw firepower. Ammo is plentiful, and damage output goes further. But on intense, extreme, and insane, shoulder swapping becomes critical. Friendly fire is constant in tight tunnels, damage scales up with difficulty, skills can make or break a mission fast, and sloppy positioning gets punished. Xenomorphs don't need to lift a claw if Marines are taking each other out. Nobody wants to see their name on the final stat screen having dealt enough friendly fire to kill a teammate. That's a quick way to get booted. Friendly fire also causes a brief stumble that can ruin a perfectly timed headshot or stop a teammate from using a critical ability on a boss. In my experience, friendly fire peaks when a squad exits narrow passageways and rushes to establish firepower superiority in a new zone. In this video, we'll cover how to minimize that risk and maximize kills. If you're chasing the Platinum Trophy, you'll need trigger discipline, which only about 0.9% of players earn. Mastering shoulder swapping and applying tactics I'll share will get you there. Let's start with a few key terms to get things streamlined. They're just here for quick reference so you can come back and look at them later, and we'll demonstrate each one as we go, so let's move on. This is the default right shoulder firing position. The camera sits just above and behind the Marine's right shoulder. Here, the Marine is aiming down sights with a rifle and a slight scope zoom, which blocks nearly a quarter of the surrounding view. With a full scope zoom, the character disappears entirely. We'll break that down in more detail later. This is the left shoulder firing position. Shoulder swapping means switching between right or left hand dominant firing, and it critically changes the camera angle. In Aliens Fireteam Elite, you can swap which shoulder you're firing from with a single button while aiming down sights. Press the left control stick on PlayStation or Xbox, or left shift on PC. Swapping shoulders shifts the line of fire and camera angle, reorienting your feet and shoulders while the character's center mass stays put. This camera shift provides key tactical advantages. In the game settings under Gameplay, the Persistent Shoulder ADS option controls how shoulder swapping behaves. When off, every time you aim down sights, the camera defaults to the right shoulder. When on, it remembers the last shoulder you used. I strongly recommend setting it to on. This gets a little more important when we're talking about snap to cover. The game auto swaps your shoulder based on the direction you slide along the wall. When you step off while still aiming, your firing orientation stays the same, but if you lower your weapon or re-enter ADS with persistent shoulder turned off, it defaults to the right shoulder. That sudden camera and line of sight shift often pushes players into a teammate's fire. Keeping persistent shoulder on maintains your last firing orientation and helps avoid friendly fire. Field of view is the player camera cone, how much of the scene the camera can see at once regardless of obstructions. Think of it as the maximum angular width that can be visible. This view narrows sharply when you aim down sights, depending on your weapon and attachments. I've measured our Marines' base field of view at about 85 degrees when not aiming. Aiming with a rifle drops it to 52 degrees, 10% zoom gives you 44 degrees, and a 25% zoom gives you 35 degrees, until you're essentially looking straight down the line of fire. Line of fire is the actual bullet path from the weapon's muzzle or camera perspective. We'll represent it with a small cone rather than a straight line, because recoil and weapon accuracy cause projectiles to spread, so the aim point and impact point don't always align. There are actually two lines of fire, and understanding them explains some seemingly impossible shots. Aliens Fireteam Elite is a third-person game, so you view action over the character's shoulder. Yet, the camera line of fire and character line of fire both appear dead center. In real-world ballistics, an offset muzzle would eventually miss as distances change, but the game solves this with camera-based raycasting. When you fire, the engine sends an invisible ray from the camera to the target. The projectile follows that ray, while the visible muzzle flash and gun barrel are just visual effects. At the same time, the engine checks the character line of fire for obstacles. If it collides, the shot is cancelled, producing those wall sparks or bullet marks you sometimes see. Shoulder swapping determines which side of your character can safely peek without muzzle clipping, improving both line of sight around cover and overlap with teammates' sector of fire. Line of sight is the area Marines can physically see within their field of view, limited by camera position and obstacles. Shoulder swapping lets Marines peek farther around cover, widening what they can see. Managing lines of sight maximizes coverage so the fire team controls more space with the same number of players, boosting situational awareness and putting more guns on target. Field of fire is the total area a weapon can engage. You might see an enemy in your line of sight, but be unable to hit it if the weapon can't reach. A flamethrower is a perfect example. Its range is very limited. Think of field of fire as the weapon's capability. This xenomorph is inside that field. This smaller one is not, so you can't score a hit. A sector of fire is the pre-designated area a Marine is responsible for. When moving, it can simply be a direction you're covering, as in, I'm covering the rear, or I'm on the left covering right. Think of it as your fire team responsibility. To define sectors, use terrain features with left and right limits where each Marine engages enemies. Overlap those limits where you expect the most trouble to create a kill zone. You can still engage threats in a teammate's sector, but you must always monitor your own. Too many players merely react to enemy spawns instead of deliberately shaping sectors to direct fire and create kill zones, which leaves the team vulnerable. The kill zone is where multiple fields of fire and sectors of fire overlap to concentrate firepower. This is how you melt elites and stop enemies before they reach the squad. Ignoring kill zones means you're fighting as individuals, not as a coordinated fire team. Finally, a choke point is any location where enemies are forced through a narrow approach to reach an objective, perfect for creating a kill zone. And no, this isn't just door holding. That exploit uses a choke point, but choke points work anywhere you can funnel enemies. Let's get oriented to some graphics. This is an overhead representation and how we're going to demonstrate how and why to use shoulder swapping. Our lone Marine is right shoulder firing by default with a xenomorph target in the center. The blue outer cone marks an 85-degree non-aim down sight field of view anchored by the gray camera icon. Inside it, a second blue cone shows the aim down sight field of view with no scope zoom, and a narrow blue cone represents the line of fire. Green dotted lines mark the edge of line of sight. Everything beyond them is a blind zone. This Marine is advancing along the right side of the corridor. That position blocks line of sight to the right around the wall, but provides solid cover from that direction. The green cone shows the total line of sight. Most players stay in right shoulder firing and hug the left wall. When a full fire team does the same, everyone stacks left, shrinking the team's combined line of sight and reducing the kill zone. We'll cover the full fire team effect shortly. This example just illustrates how line of sight can be obscured by positioning. Remember, line of sight comes from the camera, not the weapon or player's head. Notice how close the camera is to the wall. When the Marine turns left to engage targets, the view can shift to a brief first-person perspective. It's a smart feature to prevent clipping, but it cuts situational awareness and can force players off the wall, exposing them to teammates' fire. This Marine has shoulder swapped to a left shoulder firing position, but remains in the same spot. The camera now sits farther left, letting them see deeper around the right corner while keeping a fuller sight line to the left. This stance also provides better cover from the right, critical against synthetics and spitters, and makes it easier to back up without crossing teammates' line of fire or causing more friendly fire. The field of view shift may look minor now, but its benefits compound quickly. Now let's pivot left to engage a target, what we'll call cross-aiming. In this stance, the Marine can pivot about 30 to 40 degrees before the camera collides with the wall. If the Marine stays in right shoulder firing, as in the earlier slide, they'd have to push off the wall to get the same line of fire. Without that adjustment, the camera would intersect the wall after only a few degrees of turn. Extra movement takes extra time, it creates more chances for things to go wrong. As the Marine advances to the next room, the wider camera angle lets them peek around the corner more effectively and stay ready to return fire while backing up if needed. Now things get interesting. Let's add in some teammates. This is a common in-game arrangement. 3 players right shoulder firing by default and staggered across the corridor. Together, they create a kill zone that concentrates firepower to eliminate enemies faster and cut blind spots, keeping the fire team alive longer. For clarity, we're showing only the line of fire and aim down sight field of view with no scope zoom. Remember that when not aiming down sights, the kill zone is larger thanks to the wider field of view and character abilities, though hip firing is far less accurate. We're also simplifying sectors of fire as directional cones rather than terrain-based features to illustrate how overlapping fields of fire combine to form a kill zone. In formal doctrine, a kill zone is terrain defined, but here it represents concentrated firepower created by overlapping sight and fire sectors in the moment. The Marine on the right side swaps shoulders, reducing blind spots for the entire team and slightly expanding the kill zone. Hugging the wall lets the Marine peek further around the corner for better cover, and the right-end Marine can pivot more freely to engage. Let's look at where the fire team is aiming overall. Here, the entire squad is right shoulder firing with the end Marines aimed outward. This feels natural and is probably the most common setup because it seems obvious to peek around corners for maximum line of sight and next room coverage. But the kill zone disappears unless the end Marines pivot inward. Both flanks are exposed, and those Marines can't engage enemies on the opposite side without pivoting and leaving their own sectors. They'll never see a spitter's acid shot from the blind side. This formation is best used briefly when flooding a room and helps minimize friendly fire by avoiding crossed lines of fire. It's fine for scanning single targets, but not ideal for horde surges or elites. We'll take the right-end Marine and shoulder swap them to a left shoulder firing stance. This increases overlap between the middle and right-end Marines' sectors of fire and expands the team's overall line of sight to the right. Here's an overlay of the right shoulder firing Marines' field of view and line of fire. With this comparison, we can see that the right shoulder stance allows fewer degrees of pivot before the camera intersects the wall. Let's have the Marines aim inward, crossing their sectors of fire to form a choke point and kill zone. This tactic is perfect for passageways or door openings to melt elites and control horde swarms. When a drone charges, a kill zone can stop it before it pounces on you. This formation is excellent for clearing threats before pushing into a room. The end Marines pivot inward to cover far sides while protecting their blind spots. However, with the far right Marine right shoulder firing, they're very close to the middle Marine's line of fire, which may force only 2 Marines to maintain firing instead of 3. The kill zone naturally narrows with distance, but can be widened by pivoting slightly, something the right Marine's camera angle doesn't allow well here. This setup also leaves a slightly larger blind spot to the right and limits the ability to shift fire left. Again, turning the right end Marine to a left shoulder firing stance places them just at the edge of the center Marine's field of view and outside the middle line of fire. The kill zone expands slightly, and the right end Marine can pivot left more freely. Each Marine pivots less to support teammates' sectors of fire than they would when aiming outward, saving precious time and reducing blind spots. When approaching corridor turns, have one Marine snap to cover at the corner with their firing arm opposite the turn. On a left turn, as shown, they should use right shoulder firing. A second Marine stacks behind, also right shoulder firing, to extend line of sight down the corridor. The third Marine swaps to the far wall and left shoulder swaps. This formation concentrates firepower into the choke point ahead and lets the forward Marine pivot only a few degrees to cover the rear. Breach, Mission 4-1, is a perfect example of a right corner turn where shoulder swapping kill zones and choke points become critical, and ignoring them can quickly wreck a mission. After climbing the staircase, you reach the bioremediation waste manifold on Deck 26, a large room packed with synthetics. Many squads rage quit here or immediately after the battle, especially on Extreme and Insane, because you enter a ready-made enemy kill zone with minimal side cover. To counter this, teams often trigger the synthetics and hold them at the entrance choke point. Now, I'm not going to debate door holding tactics, it's just going to happen sometimes, but if you plan to use it, here's a setup that applies these tactical principles and avoids rocket spam chaos. Position a technician with a particle turret on the hallway drum so they can stay close enough to gain turret synergy perks. You can try with a flame turret, but the field of fire is too shallow to really be effective. The technician should left shoulder fire, teamed with a sniper in a snap to cover position on the corner. The technician can fire around the sniper and duck back to reload. Recons really shine here as long-range snipers and ammo suppliers while everyone nerfs health from the ammo drone. Since only one Marine can remain fully in cover while firing, a Phalanx can post up with their shield at the corner for protection. Just watch for those Warden synth grenades. This formation keeps 2 Marines in cover and backed by a turret that's easy to redeploy if destroyed. Careful, deliberate firing further minimizes friendly fire, while the technician can slide in and out to throw shot coils into the choke point. Here are a few other considerations about shoulder swapping. Shoulder swapping to a left shoulder firing stance only applies while aiming down sights. As soon as you reload, use an ability, or place a consumable, the camera snaps back to the right shoulder, shifting your body into a right shoulder alignment. You may need to step slightly left so an ability can clear a doorway or obstruction you were tucked behind while swapped. If you're on comms, give a quick warning before stepping out to avoid that friendly fire. Full scopes make it harder to track which shoulder you're firing from because they remove peripheral vision and hide your character, though you can briefly tell during the zoom in. This can cause Marines to drift closer to teammates' lines of fire than intended. It's not a knock on scopes, but you must remember which shoulder you zoomed from, since it's not obvious while aiming. Full scopes work best when a Marine sets up well behind the fire team or on a distant flank. The Phalanx class can't shoulder swap with the shield up because it counts as an ability, and that shield should be active almost any time you're not advancing quickly. Let your teammates know your preferred positioning if you can. With the shield raised, the camera always stays over the right shoulder, letting you see slightly further to the left. By mastering shoulder swapping as second nature and planning kill zones, you'll dramatically improve gameplay on higher difficulties. This is how a fire team achieves zero friendly fire. Apply these principles even on standard difficulty. It's not just about reducing friendly fire. Concentrating firepower and maintaining clear lines of fire produce faster kills and cleaner wins. Platinum trophies might also go to rocket spammers, but using solid tactics proves you truly earned it. Watch your sectors of fire, Marines!